Hi, and welcome to this important and wonderful conversation on Women in Pan, part of the Better Tomorrow series. My name is Attillah Springer, and it is my pleasure to have as our guest today, Vanessa Headley. Vanessa, welcome, and thank you so much for taking the time to spend with us to talk about your life as a woman in Pan.
Attillah, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to all of the questions you have for me as a woman in Pan.
Okay, so we'll start from the very beginning. What's your first memory of Pan as an instrument, as a sound, as something that you experienced?
Okay, so the first time I experienced Pan, my mom was doing a course at UE, a certificate in music, and she was studying the steelpan. Don't ask me how she ended up in that because she's a biologist and chemist. But she was doing this course. I think she was in love with the instrument, and she would come home and she would rehearse in the living room for exams. So the first time I heard it, a friend of hers actually lent her an old pan. It was rusty, it wasn't even painted, and she was surprised to see it and all that, and she would practice on that. And I think she was learning a song called The Magic Flute at that point in time, and I was just totally captivated by that, and I found myself kind of learning it quietly. Then she always tell the story about one day she came into the living room and I was playing the song. That was really my first introduction to the instrument.
And how old were you when your prodigious talent emerged? So you were 4 years old.
I was 4.
And that was, I mean, you come from 4 generations of musicians. So although your mom was a biologist and chemist, you know, you are in a family of music constantly. What's it like to inherit a family business that is also so central to how we feel about ourselves as a people?
All right. So when my mom started Golden Hands, it was a result of my interest in the instrument, and that spread to my friends and my cousins, and it kind of grew there. And I guess I just have always been involved in Golden Hands, in what we now call the organization Golden Hands, not just a band. I've kind of taken over a lot of the reins, so to speak, over the years, the responsibilities, specifically the musical side of it. I get frustrated with administrative stuff, but I definitely now function as the musical director of Golden Hands, and it was just a natural transition for me.
Yeah.
Mommy's still there, but, you know, I'm there too.
Having a steel band in your living room, you know, creates a different idea of what a safe space for a steel pan is.
True.
And the idea of pan being home for people. Yeah. But then your living room then becomes home for so many other people in your community. What's it like to share your home in that way? And where do the boundaries exist or don't exist?
So let me tell you, as a young, only child, I was livid. I was so upset because I had to share, and I wasn't accustomed doing that with people who I felt that you're not my brother or sister. And I went through that period of a little jealousy and so on. I have to share my mommy, I have to share my granny, I have to share my stuff, I have to share my space. That was a little challenging for me, I would admit, but I think my mom handled that very well. She never gave me any special treatment. As a matter of fact, I got more buff than anybody else. And it made me realize that being open and sharing and teaching the people around me was a benefit to me in the long run, you know, and it became a natural part of who I am.
Yeah. So you start off in the Panyard living room, and you know, pan starts to become more and more part of your life. When did you make the decision that pan was going to be your career of choice, music was going to be your career of choice?
So I was going to convent, and I had to choose subjects. You know, you have to choose which class you want to go into, sciences or business. And I didn't feel like I was really fitting into any. I mean, I wasn't coping, but I just wasn't happy doing any of those. And at that point, you know, I started asking about music. And Long story short, I ended up being the first student at convent to do music for CXC, and I did the steel pan, of course. And I mean, that's where I just said, okay, well, here I am. After this, I'm going to UE and I'm doing music and I'm going to be a musician. I think that's what really forced me into making that decision, not wanting to stick to the sciences or the business, but do what I was really passionate about. Yeah.
And your family was 100% in support of that?
Yeah, after some time, mommy, of course, but she took me to the Panyard. I'm not talking about Golden Hands, I'm talking about the Panyard. We went to Panasonic Connection, which is a small band in San Fernando, and then I went to Hatters and so on. But she got some flack from the family because she was a worship leader in church. So it was like, how at that time, pan in church was taboo. So everybody was like, how. But they eventually came around because they saw the impact it had on me and my cousins and all of the younger people that mommy was teaching over the years. Yeah. It was rough, but everybody's happy now, I think.
Yeah. And certainly as these successes start rolling in, everybody is like, oh, yeah, you can actually do this thing.
Yeah, and even going to doing CXC music, doing the steel pan and steel side music, and going into UE with nothing else to fall back on, but it was just music, was kind of like paving the way for a lot of people who came through Golden Hands. So they felt, oh, if she could do it, then all right, we could do it too.
Soon after completing your studies at UE, you then became the first pan major at Berkeley to be given a scholarship. What was that like to leave the safety of home, leave the safety of a community that, had been very supportive and surrounding you, and go into this big, and I mean, Berkeley is one of the most venerable music institutions that, a lot of musicians aspire to. And so going into that space, what was the energy that you took with you to make it through?
It was scary. It was. I mean, I was around 21 at that time, and I was still scared because it's like, you leave your little bubble where everything is nice and comfortable, and you go into a strange place. I was alone, more or less. I mean, I took another member of the band with me, but we were alone. He was younger than me, so I was the one in charge. But it was exhilarating. It opened up my mind so much because I was able to see musicians just in a musical space, being great. The lecturers were fantastic. They were really encouraging. They were really impressed by the instrument. And at that time, I was playing with 4 sticks. So I had a marimba teacher, Gustavo, and he played the marimba with 4 sticks as they usually do. So we had that relationship there, and we learned a lot from each other. So the entire thing was just like, I didn't really want to come back home. It was a very short period of time. I was anxious to go back. But then I came home and I was like, I think I have something that I need to do here first before I decide to migrate and, and I stayed. But I have no regrets because I was able to take so much from the short time at Berkeley and really apply it to Golden Hands and everything else I've been involved in. Yeah.
And you've been involved in quite a bit. Arranging and teaching. What do you see as your favorite part?
My favorite part? Wow. Okay, so I never really wanted to be a teacher as in my career path. But it just follows that I am. It just makes sense, right? But for me, the most exciting or the one that I enjoy the most is arranging. I really enjoy taking a piece of music that is so, basic and has so much potential and just adding my personality to that. The energy that you get from the musicians when they hear something new is just something I would never trade. That's the best part for me.
So in 2010, it was the first time that you all entered in the conventional category,
right,
and you placed second.
Yes.
What was the process that you put in place to prepare for this new phase of the band's existence, and going into a new space where uncharted territory for you?
It really was that. That's an excellent question, because Golden Hands would have performed in the junior Panorama category up until that point, and we did very well in that area. Going into conventional with mostly kids was a whole other thing. We had no racks of our own, and so it was everything from logistics right up to adjusting the style of the music, the way the music was arranged, the way we presented ourselves, because we're talking about big boys here now. I mean, we were up against like arrangers like Sion Gomez and BJ Marcel, and those guys were just crazy, right? But so it was a big adjustment. But we just did what we do best, and that was we drilled for oil every day after school, and we left no stone unturned, and everybody got involved, parents, the community. It was a really big project, and I think we did very well. The thing about it, for small band, that competition was at South Key in Port of Spain.
Yes.
So it was different, but everybody was talking about the band that was coming around the corner onto South Key from the promenade, and they were hearing these heavy basses. Now, our bands are tuned by Bertrand Kelman, so he's renowned for his bass tuning, and I guess the amplification of the buildings and all of that. I don't know, I think we sounded more threatening than we really were, but everybody always talks about that, and the experience for us was just, coming around the corner and then seeing the crowd and people who never would have heard of you before, but because they enjoy the music, cheering us on, and so many young people, they were really very supportive. It was kind of mind-blowing to see people's response to us.
So what's the average age of your band members?
The band members range from 5 to 23 right now. Most of them are in their teens, what we call tweens. They are either sitting CXC exams or A-level examinations.
In 2018, you led the band to victory in the small conventional category. And you had the distinction of being the first woman arranger to take that first place, take that championship in that category. What was that victory like for you? What inspiration do you think that that had for the young women members of your very young band of players?
Yes, okay. So in 2018, I actually sang the song that we played. So it was an original composition, Trouble, in an attempt to create something from scratch, like totally from me. It wasn't just a first as in winning in small, it was the first as in singing, composing, and arranging. And I think that is what kind of helped people see us more. Not to mention, I based the song off of our extempo Sans Humanité. So there was that line as one of the hook lines in the piece. And it really came out of a little pecan that I was getting from my then boss, Kenny Phillips Hadawak, who was saying, you and your little band of children. If anybody knows Kenny, that's how he is, right? It's just good fun. And he said, what are they going to do? What are they going to do? And I say, you want to see me give trouble? And then I called it Trouble, and we did that. And then everybody was calling them the little snipers. It was a whole thing. So this season was really charged with that kind of energy, and we were determined to make a statement. We did. The members, especially the young female members of the band, I think they were so captivated with this song from the time they heard it. I think because they could relate, especially to Santi Manite, they would always sing that part. And it really encouraged them. It was very encouraging. And it was an endearing piece of music. So they felt that they could accomplish and achieve and they could conquer, and it had all that energy behind it. And a few of them saw themselves in me. And I think that they look forward to actually maybe writing their own songs in the future. They've told me things like that, and I will encourage them all the way. So it feels good to know that I have had that influence on members close to me in the band.
Yeah. How would you describe your musical style and your arranging process?
Yeah. So I listen to all kinds of music. All kinds of music. I don't discriminate, and I enjoy a good Latin jazz fusion. So when I listen to music, I listen to the percussion mostly. And maybe that has a lot to do with the fact that the steelpan is a percussive instrument. So you find that my approach to writing music and arranging music would be very percussive. I try to layer rhythms more than I would really focus on harmony. I found myself trying to do more things with harmonic structure now that I'm getting older and I'm listening to the greats like, D.C. Spradley and now Xander and those guys who really pack in some thick harmonies in the music. But I like the percussive aspect of writing music. I think the steelpan gives you room to layer rhythms so well. And the voices, because you have these distinct voices, we get a clear sense of almost as if you're putting together an engine room. So that's how I approach arranging. I always start with melody and bass. Once I have that, then I could fill in the mids. And people always say that I give the cellos all the work. And it's true. They get all the lines and the seconds and the double seconds. But I should mention in our band, we have something called the extended seconds, which was created by Bertrand Kelman. That pan is like a cross between a cello and a double seconds. It has that unique range, and they get all the work. I like to play that. So that replaces like the quads in our band. Again, I'm really excited talking about it. But that's my arranging style in a nutshell, I think.
I want to switch to talking about moving from music into music psychology.
Right.
What prompted that shift for you? Mm-hmm. And if you can advance any thoughts that you have on the idea of music as medicine.
Right. So I was always intrigued by the way music affects our brains, and specifically musicians. I know for myself, I'm a different person when I'm on my instrument or when I'm playing or when I'm listening to music that I enjoy. So I felt that it was a good time in my life to kind of just take advantage of a little downtime I had and get into finding out more about that. So I did a distance learning course at Sheffield University. We did have to go there twice, and I met some amazing people, musicians. What I learned, the most valuable thing I learned from doing that course was musicians have a whole different way of processing life. And I did my paper on improv and its impact on musicians and musicians who had never improvised before. So, of course, using all the instruments that we had to use to measure and whatever, I realized that putting a musician in a space where they're forced to produce something on the spot spontaneously actually strengthens their intrinsic motivation and their self-confidence, image of self, and all of those things over a very short period of time. Because as I said, they're forced into a position where they have to perform and they have to please the listeners. And it is a lot of pressure on the musician, but at the end of it, they're better for it. character-wise and cognitively and all of that stuff in a very short space of time. So that was fascinating to me, and it still is. I employ some of the things I learned with my students to get them their mind right when it comes to performance. Yeah.
How do you see, as a teacher and as somebody who is still interacting with young people, what kind of impact have you seen COVID have on young people specifically? And how do you think that, the reopening of spaces like the Panyard can help with the healing process and the processing of what has actually happened in the past 2 years?
Yeah. So, my opinion of that may be controversial, but let me just say, I don't believe that COVID is the problem. I think it's how we handled it. Yes, it's a pandemic. Who knows? Maybe a few months from now, we may have another virus that's life-threatening, but the way... No, yeah. But the way we handled it, especially at home here for arts and culture, it could have been better handled and managed. That impact I have seen firsthand, the degradation of young people and mentally, emotionally. I mean, we're talking suicidal thoughts and actions, and an overall loss of interest in life. I mean, they're basically locked away at home, and they've been stripped of an opportunity to engage with their peers and like-minded people in overnight. We are adults, and we find it hard to cope with that. Imagine someone who's 11, 12. We're setting a precedent where communicating via the internet, the tablet, the computer is king. And trust me, that is no way for a steelpan musician, I'll bring it back to that, to ever excel. I mean, it's not going to work. So we have to immediately get our kids back out to the Panyards and to the schools and get them back to engage in real life as we were made as humans to do. And I think it will quickly reverse the other pandemic that's happening behind closed doors.
Could you speak to some of the challenges that you have faced in your own journey, in your choice of career, in the work that you have chosen to do? What are some of the challenges that you have faced there and personally as well?
Personal challenges would definitely involve my social life. I remember when I was in my teens, and I would say, I wish I had a life. I would say that to Mom, because I was always playing pan. And everybody else was going to the mall, and I was upset. But trust me, I have no regrets now. It's just that I became comfortable. I learned how to be comfortable with my own company, unless I was, in the Panyard. And now, as I've made it a career, I write music. I spend hours writing music. So I'm mostly in that zone alone, and I'm fine with it now. I think I consider myself an introvert. I'm good to be alone. I could survive like that. But it has affected relationships with my family and friends and romantic relationships, because when you're in that zone, I mean, I'm sure you could relate that when you're in that zone, you really can't come out, especially if you're in a moment where the creative juices are flowing, and if people around you can't understand that, it's difficult for them. Mm-hmm. So those, I've had to sacrifice things for that. Again, no regrets, but that's what it takes. And I think that now I'm in a place where I'm getting older, and I'm understanding how to balance and manage my time and make time for social activities. I'm now learning that. So I think it will work out just fine in the long run. Yeah, managing my career as a musician with life as a person.
If there were other challenges that you felt that you faced that,
Oh, yes.
that your art has helped you to overcome?
Of course. Well, major challenge in the world of steel pan where, you know, women are not as heralded, maybe, as the guys. One of the challenges I still face is a sense of my music has a gender. That's the way I think of it. So it's almost like, as a woman do that, you know, I would be on the drag and I would hear the comments. Now, a lot of people don't know what I look like. So I'd be just in the middle of them and they talking. And it's a woman do that, you know, yeah, boy, she bad boy. And it's like, so what? If you didn't know that, could you tell the difference between a woman doing it and a man? I guess it's the novelty of it, which it shouldn't be because we've had Michelle Huggins Watson, we've had Natasha around for so long, mashing up with Panorama and all of that. We've had all of that. We've had Miss Daisy, the first female. But somehow, it's almost like, oh, who is that woman? And everybody, we're a spectacle. And then there's a not so nice side of it where you, as a female, you feel like you're in a space you shouldn't or you have no right to be in. And, what do you call rivalry among arrangers kind of brings that out. And it transfers and spreads to the players because players are loyal to their arrangers. So you get the guys, I think they're just scared. They will get beat by a girl. So you get some of that, that energy coming out. But after Panorama, everything is fine. It's just a little tense around that time, But it's a challenge that I don't really pay it any mind. I mean, I've been hurt. I've cried after Panoramas. I've heard comments like commentators and people that you think shouldn't say certain things. I have. I can't lie about that. But it hasn't deterred me.
Was there ever time in your career that you wanted to make the choice to stick with performing as opposed to going into arranging and teaching and that kind of thing? Was performance ever the thing that you were really drawn to?
It definitely was. I spent a significant portion of my life so far practicing as a soloist. And, I performed for music festivals, and it was doing that, preparing for a music festival, the discipline required to execute the music that is not idiomatic to the steel pan. So we're talking music for violin, flute, whatever, that we used to have to transcribe for pan. That was so intense, but I loved it because at the end of it, I was always a better player. And for a long time, I thought that I would be a performer. But in the steel pan world, I quickly realized that performance as a soloist is not, when you say a professional steel pan player, there are very few steel pan musicians who perform. I have to be very careful how I say this, but at the level of what some people consider serious music. Now, I don't know what is serious music, I'm just saying. But people like Liam Teague, who perform with orchestras and so on, and have carved that niche, they're very few. As a steel pan solo performer, you more readily find people who play popular music in more social settings. And I didn't want that. But it became, do I commit my time fully to being a performer and leave out arranging and all those things to an extent? Because the way my personality is and I'm in one thing, it's difficult for me to split up into. But I chose to back off of playing. Mainly because I started teaching and mentoring younger people who I would teach them and they would be the ones in the forefront playing. And then I would just write music for them compose music for them, arrange music for them. And then it just kind of became, I ain't touched that pan for a while, and I regret that because I miss playing, but I get to write music for people. I get to create. I don't have to play someone else's music all the time. And I guess you could say I could write music for myself to play. Yes, I will do that. I have people on my back for me to do that. But I chose arranging and composing over performing. And it was supposed to be temporary. But you know, who knows what will happen in the near future.
Tied to the idea of, you know, what advice and what support do you have for the up and coming young women musicians, women panists, arrangers, that kind of thing? What are some of the advice? What is some of the troubleshooting that you can offer to them?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I do regret not continuing playing, even if it was just like personal practice. I kind of put that off to the side to make room for other things. And I would definitely tell younger versions of me, or whatever you call it, young upcoming musicians, don't do that. Don't feel like you have to choose, you know, just make better time management choices. And also, do not be deterred by the detractors. It's very easy, especially as a female musician, not just steelpan, but as a female musician, to take a lot of the negative energy, to take it on, and then you want to lock yourself away. I did that. I locked myself away. I was like, I don't want. But if you could, you have to build character and confidence. And if you're not confident in how you look, be confident in your music. And that will help you to ignore all of that. And the most important thing is giving to the world of your gift. And that's the ability to create music. So the rest of it is tolerable once you're committed to doing that.
Tied to that question is also coming back to the idea of the Panyard as a safe space. Mm-hmm. Given the age of your band, you know, you don't have some of the issues that, say, bigger, older bands have, where you have predatory behavior, for example.
Right.
Among, you know, older people exhibiting predatory behavior to the younger people. But you know, what are some of the things that make your Panyard specifically a safe space for young people, so that, it is a band of young people who are really committed to excelling musically, but without having to deal with some of the other social challenges that would, you know, affect other steel bands?
Yeah. Well, anybody who is or was a member of Golden Hands and is listening to this now would say and agree that the buffer to all of that is Miss Franca Headley. She is the one that protects this space and the members. The relationship is more like a family, and it sounds cliche, but she's mommy to everybody. So we don't have people coming in and being able to do as they please. And the way our band runs, the way members come in is by reference. So you don't just walk in and walk out when you feel like it. So we have, you know, some things in place to kind of make sure that we keep it safe. But there's always a chance of things happening, especially around the time when we do invite people in to perform with us, so maybe Panorama or whatever. But I think we have such a good system running now that people come in and they just fall in and it's fine. We don't have those kinds of issues. I have to be honest. We have the protection of parents. The dads are very protective of everyone, and so it is really a safe space. It's fine.
Some of the women who you would have looked up to, some of the women in Pan who would have been an inspiration to you. Who are some of those names you called to a little bit earlier?
And I'm going to repeat them because I could tell you there are many. And, you know, since I've had the opportunity to meet people and interview people as a radio show thing, hostess, yes, I've met people and learned things about them. That is all. But no one has come close, for me personally, as close as Natasha Joseph and Michelle Huggins-Watts. And there's personal reasons, which I will tell you now. When I started playing Pan, and I really started, the first Pan I played was the tenor. And then I played the double tenor for a while. And then my mom surprised me with a double second and I was mad. And now I always feel terrible about it because I know how much she sacrificed to get me that Pan, which was supposed to be for some big shot person somewhere in the States that Mr. Bertrand Kelman made. And she bought me that. And I was like, I don't play that, I just play double tenor. But now Bugsy is asking me for that Pan and I will not give him it. So when I started playing double second, I didn't know anything about anyone really. I was playing in a bubble home in my living room. And then people would start saying to me, you remind me of Natasha, you remind me of Natasha. I'd be like, who is Natasha? Who is Natasha? So then I found out who Natasha was. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is Natasha. Natasha paved the way for people like me. She stood up and stood her ground on stage, Rama Jane, with Bugsy and Robbie. And she didn't falter. And she has traveled the globe and she's really blazed the trail for me personally and made me more confident to go out there and do the things that people like me, meaning female, were not really doing. That's Natasha. And then, of course, Michelle, well, she has obviously won Panorama. And that in itself opened a lot of eyes internationally. Again, she made it easier for me to believe in myself. And on a more direct personal level, she is very encouraging to me all the time. And as a teacher, I know she functions as vice principal in Trinity East, and her students do CXC Music, and I also did that. And there was a lot of connection there as far as education. And I looked and continue to look up to her as an educator. And then she was captain of a major band, Phase 2. She led them to many panoramas and so on. And she just has this superwoman vibe, right? And then I want to jump back to Natasha because I forgot to mention that when Golden Hands had the first ever steelpan pageant, and we invited Natasha to be one of the panelists, adjudicators, and they kind of would mentor the what do you call them? The people in the pageant over a period of time. And she selflessly gave tips and taught, and in a very little space of time, some really exceptional musicians. And I know to this day when I see them, they always talk about Natasha and how much she influenced them. So, I mean, these are two people who they've given to the steel pan space, and they've influenced, and they've changed, and they've blazed trails, and they continue to do that. So I salute both of those ladies. But I do want to kind of pinpoint in my field, media being steelpan show. There are two females that before I really became involved in hosting, they had me on their shows, and that's Barbara Steely Rodan. She's Trinidadian, but she lives in the US, and Vanessa Headley, and they both gave me a space to speak about my music and myself, and they've been doing pan shows for over a decade and featuring people who we don't hear about very often. And the importance of the steel pan show to me is it kind of takes care of the lag and the lapse between major pan events. So if you're listening to a show weekly, every Sunday or every whatever, you know you can tune in and you get your pan music, or you hear an interview with somebody that you never heard speak before. There's always something happening on air. So that's the importance of their shows to me, and I think that they need to be mentioned because it takes a lot, and I know firsthand, to present a show like that. It's a few hours, but you have to do the research, and as you know, it takes time. You want to say the right things and give credit to who needs to have it and all of that. So, shout out to Barbara and Vanessa. They both do an exceptional job. So another person I wanted to mention is Nubia Williams. Nubia has been working nonstop over the years. I mean, she went to UE around the same time as my mom. And since then, she's been working she has the Caribbean Gifted and Talented Foundation. So she trains young people across the Caribbean. She does numerous workshops. She teaches teachers, teaches adjudicators, and she is very good at laying the foundation for, those competitions and so on that we feature across the Caribbean. But she is also one of those people who I looked up to as a player. She's an exceptional player, and she actually was a music festival performer. She did really, really well. So, and in the era of Liam Teague and all of those. So she's from South, and I really and she's a personal friend, and I know of her love for the instrument is deep. She says deep down here. So I really wanted to mention Nubia and her family, yeah, for sure.
As an arranger, as somebody who is blazing trails in music, what is it like to work on the transcription of the work of perhaps one of the best-known Panorama steel band arrangers ever, Bugsy Sharp? What is the experience like working with him on transcribing his work?
Right. So I realized while I was working on Bugsy's music with him that he's not just one of the best steel pan musicians. He is one of the best musicians in the world. He writes his music in his head, we know this, but he plays it first on the piano. So he would have these cassette tapes, stacks of cassettes of him ponging at the piano, whatever was coming to mind. So, and he's singing. So he's singing on the line and he's playing the harmony. And I'm like, this man could play any instrument. I look at him, right? I was like, if I give you a guitar, you could do that too. So he's doing that and he's recording it. And then I now have the task of going on those cassettes and making sense of what is there. I mean, it's clear. It's music. It's a performance. But then how do we distribute that for an orchestra? So working with him on that it's easy because he knows what he wants. And it was beneficial to me because I learned a lot about voicing and how he voices his music, where he puts things and the way he distributes his chords. So I enjoyed that immensely. He is very particular. And I think that's a quality. It's not it is a strong quality because at the end, once he's satisfied with his product, trust you me, everybody will be. As we know, the thing about Bugsy's music is very singable. So it's very catchy. And I like that. And every song, the melodies are very simple. He likes simple melodies, but he has this way that he twists harmonies, and he has these bass lines that he likes. It just makes us something that is like straight like this into something like that. It's how I describe it, right? But it takes you on this journey as like, how did he go there? The experience writing what is now his first book, volume 1 of Blend Booksy Sharp, it was a challenge because that was the same year as the international conference on Panorama. And I did that in a matter of days because there was a deadline to get it out and all of that. So it was like a intense, very highly pressured moment. In the end, I think the book has maybe 6 or 8 original compositions that are fantastic. His music is amazing, including Baby Ashley, which he wrote for his daughter. That's a popular one, Phase 2 plays. Oh, and mind you, also transcribing his solos. So that in itself, we know what that could be like. For me, just in wrapping up, that was like a short space of time that I was able to grow. You know, I learned things I would not have learned had it not been my one-on-one with Booksy.
Tell me about your work outside of Golden Hands. Who have you been collaborating with, and what does it mean to be outside of your home band but also still in the South?
My first major opportunity to work outside of Golden Hands was actually Phase 2. That's not South, but that was a good first, right? So I did some drilling for Phase 2 the year they did Red, Black, and White. And following that, and Booksy wasn't around for a little bit, they had to perform for the Big Five. So he asked me to arrange 2 songs for them. And I was like, what? Me? But it worked out well, and we did that. In 2020, I did arrange for Labrie Nightingales in the large category and Trinidad Valley Harps, penal, not the one up here. It felt, I have to say, pretty good to be appreciated and wanted at home. Home meaning South. I remember people I know and grew up around, Panyards I played in. Specifically, well, Trinidad Valley Harps, they had not left their yard for decades. So just getting to the Savannah for semis was an accomplishment for them. And I think that has given the band a little kick into their future endeavors. And well, Labrie has been doing great with BJ Marcel. I have to say thank you to him, of course, because he did give me the opportunity to arrange for them while he took over Exodus. As I said before, players are very loyal to their arrangers. So there was a little something there in transitioning from BJ to me. But because so many of them are young and I know how to relate to them, it was pretty good in the long run. Pretty nice. We had a good time. Yeah, but it was a good experience to be right home in South and doing something historic, I guess.
What does a better tomorrow for Pan look like for you?
A better tomorrow is unity, not hypocrisy, and not self-serving attitudes. I think that's really damaging our steelpan community. It's damaging the arts in Trinidad and Tobago. And I am looking forward to the day when we do things because we want to preserve the instrument. We do things because we're thinking about the next generation. And we start putting measures and systems in place for those to come. Because right now, there isn't much succession planning happening, and that's where we're faltering, because we have a lot of young players coming up. If you look at these bands, they're mostly young people, and they need that guidance. They need a system to fall into, and they need to know about our history. before somebody comes and tells them about it. So a better tomorrow would be us preparing for the generations to come and leaving a really, really good legacy.
And how do you see your work with Golden Hands, with other groups, your global work, contributing to that idea of a better tomorrow for Pan?
I know for a fact that Golden Hands, we are determined to leave that legacy for the generations to come. We have like a turnover of people. They don't always stay until they're old. They get into their early 20s and they leave and they go and they do other things in life, but they're always a Golden Hands member. So we're committed to that. And if I'm involved with another group or organization, I would want to make sure that they pattern that, because whether it's in Trinidad or outside of Trinidad, the instrument needs proper representation now and in the foreseeable future. So I would do my best to, encourage people to put systems in place for legacy building.
Vanessa, thank you so much for sharing these amazing stories of your life and journey as a woman in Pan.
You're very welcome. It was my pleasure to reflect on all of that.